Well, welcome back to our study of David and Solomon. We are now all the way down to week 9. We're looking at Solomon's wisdom from 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 1 through 28. So immediately in Solomon's reign, he establishes not only his kingdom by getting rid of some of the adversaries that his father dealt with, and he would have surely dealt with if he would not have gotten rid of them. And now we see that he really begins to, further show the establishment of the kingdom. And he is given the opportunity from God to ask for whatever he would like. And he chooses wisdom. And this is probably what Solomon is best known for. We have Abraham and his faith displayed throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament, and he is known for that. Samson is known for his strength, and others are known for other traits. Solomon is known for his wisdom. And for example, putting that even into writing, he wrote the Ecclesiastes, he wrote the Proverbs. We have a lot of his wisdom still on the record for people even today. And we are very grateful for that. Well, in this text for today, chapter 3, verses 1 to 28, we'll notice just that he began building projects right away. And even before he is given the great blessing of wisdom beyond all others by the Lord, he is already wise. He is building and he is setting up some treaties with some nations, as we'll see in verses 1 through 3. But he is going to be a great king. Then we see in verses 4 to 15 that he is a worshiper. That might be the way to put that, but particularly a prayer. And he is willing to go before the Lord with his desires and wants. And then we're going to see he puts that into action. Solomon, the wise one, if you will, verses 16 to 28, and probably one of the most well-known stories concerning Solomon in all of the Bible. We'll look at verses 16 to 28 in just a few minutes, actually, as we move through there. Booklet is particularly wanting us to notice verses 1 and 2 because this is what Solomon is all about. He wants to do the Lord's justice. He wants to be a proper judge. He wants to do things appropriately. And so we will read, since we have time in this setting, to read the entire psalm. Give the king your justice, O God, and your righteousness to the royal son. May he judge your people with righteousness, and your poor with justice. Let the mountains bear prosperity for the people, and the hills in righteousness. May he defend the cause of the poor of the people, give deliverance to the children of the needy, and crush the oppressor. May they fear you while the sun endures, and as long as the moon throughout all generations. May he be like rain that falls on the mown grass, like showers that water the earth. In his days may the righteous flourish, and peace abound, till the moon be no more. May he have dominion from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth. May desert tribes bow down before him, and his enemies lick the dust. May the kings of Tarshish and of the coastlands render him tribute. May the kings of Sheba and Seba bring gifts. May all kings fall down before him, all nations serve him. For he delivers the needy when he calls, the poor and him who has no helper. He has pity on the weak and the needy, and saves the lives of the needy. From oppression and violence he redeems their life, and precious is their blood in his sight. Long may he live. May gold of Sheba be given to him. May prayer be made for him continually, and blessings invoked for him all the day. May there be abundance of grain in the land. On the tops of the mountains may it wave. May its fruit be like Lebanon, and may people blossom in the cities like the grass of the field. May his name endure forever. his fame continue as long as the sun. May people be blessed in him. All nations call him blessed. Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who alone does wondrous things. Blessed be his glorious name forever. May the whole earth be filled with his glory. Amen and amen. The prayers of David, the son of Jesse, are ended. So here we have a prayer of David for his son Solomon. The prayers of David, the son of Jesse, are ended. And of course, David's prayer is answered in the affirmative by the Lord with great majesty and great accomplishment for Solomon. And Solomon joins in those prayers, wanting to rule well, wanting to be just, wanting to be wise. All right, so let's move to our three sections for today. First, we have Solomon the builder, 1 Kings 3, verses 1 through 3. Solomon made a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. He took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David until he had finished building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. The people were sacrificing at the high places, however, because no house had yet been built for the name of the Lord. And so we have here his own house, that would be the palace, the house of the Lord, that would be the temple, and of course the wall around Jerusalem providing protection. Solomon immediately wants to make sure his people are safe and have a place to worship, and of course his own home being a symbol of the prosperity of the nation. Notice that he makes a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and you'll read in the booklet that it was unusual for Egypt to send the princesses out from Egypt. They would marry them off, and the princes from other countries would come in, etc. But here, he took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David. So this shows that Israel was a strong nation at this point and had some standing even among this historically great nation, Egypt. So pretty amazing statement that we have here, right here in verse chapter 1. Now we're told that Solomon loved the Lord, verse 3, walking in the statutes of David his father. Only he sacrificed and made offerings at the high places. This was never God's intention. And so this was something that needed to be corrected. Of course, Solomon was building the house of the Lord. He was building the temple, and that will be one of his amazing and most profound accomplishments. Let's look at 1 Chronicles 28. When you enter into 1 Kings, there, well, even some in 2 Samuel, but there's overlap in the books 1st and 2nd Chronicles. And so let's look at some of the overlap here. And this just kind of helps us to keep everything in order and how things are occurring. David is alive as this chapter begins in 1 Chronicles. So David assembled at Jerusalem all the officials of Israel, the officials of the tribes, the officers of the divisions that served the king, the commanders of thousands, the commanders of hundreds, the stewards of all the property and livestock of the king and his sons, together with the palace officials, the mighty men, and all the seasoned warriors. Quite a gathering, correct? Then King David rose to his feet and said, "Hear me, my brothers and my people. I had it in my heart to build a house of rest for the ark of the covenant of the Lord and for the footstool of our God, and I made preparations for building. But God said to me, 'You may not build a house for my name, for you are a man of war and have shed blood. Yet the Lord God of Israel chose me from all my father's house to be king over Israel forever. For he chose Judah as leader, and in the house of Judah, my father's house, and among my father's sons, he took pleasure in me to make me king over all Israel. And of all my sons, for the Lord has given me many sons, He has chosen Solomon, my son, to sit on the throne of the kingdom of the Lord over Israel. He said to me, it is Solomon, your son, who shall build my house and my courts, for I have chosen him to be my son, and I will be his father. I will establish his kingdom forever if he continues strong in keeping my commandments and my rules, as he is today. Now, therefore, in the sight of all Israel, the assembly of the Lord, and in the hearing of our God, observe and seek out all the commandments of the Lord your God, that you may possess this good land and leave it for an inheritance to your children after you forever. So one of Solomon's destinies, if you will, one of the things he was supposed to do in the name of the Lord was to build the temple. David wanted to and could not because he was a man of blood. So moving on to the second section, Solomon the prayer. Now, before we do that, I want us to also look at something from Chronicles. This is 2 Chronicles 1, verses 1 through 6. And this picks up really where we picked up last week concerning Solomon and establishing the kingdom. And this just gives us a little bit of insight into being at the great high place, giving these sacrifices at a place that, again, was one of the pagan altars. 2 Chronicles 1, 1 through 6. Solomon, the son of David, established himself in the kingdom, and the Lord his God was with him and made him exceedingly great. Solomon spoke to all Israel, and the commanders of thousands and hundreds, to the judges, and to all the leaders in all Israel, the heads of the fathers' houses. And Solomon and all the assembly with him went to the high place that was at Gibeon, for the tent of meeting of God, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, had made in the wilderness, was there. But David had brought up the ark of God from Kiriath Jearim to the place that David had prepared for it, for he had pitched a tent for it in Jerusalem. Moreover, the bronze altar that Bezalel, the son of Uri, son of Hur, had made was there before the tabernacle of the Lord. And by the way, son of Hur, that's Ben-Hur, just like Ben Laden is the son of Laden. The same is true in Hebrew. Ben-Hur means the son of Hur. And Solomon and the assembly sought it out. And Solomon went up there to the bronze altar before the Lord, which was at the tent of meeting, and offered 1,000 burnt offerings on it. And we're going to see the parallel, and this is how we know that this takes place where it does. 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 4 to 15. All right. So the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. And we know from the Chronicles passage, he has this whole assembly with him. Solomon used to offer 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, ask what I shall give you. And Solomon said, you have shown great and steadfast love to your servant David, my father, because he walked before you in faithfulness, in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart toward you. And you have kept for him this great and steadfast love, and have given him a son to sit on his throne this day. And now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of David, my father, although I am but a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. And your servant is in the midst of your people whom you have chosen, a great people, too many to be numbered or counted for multitude. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to govern this, your great people? So Solomon shows great humility in this prayer. He understands that he needs help, and he wants help, and that's what he's asking for. He wants an understanding mind. He wants discernment. He wants to be able to govern in a way that is pleasing to the Lord. So in his request, he pleases the Lord. Verse 10, it pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this, And God said to him, because you have asked this, and have not asked for yourself long life or riches or the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right, behold, I now do according to your word. Behold, I give you a wise and discerning mind, so that none like you has been before you, and none like you shall arise after you. I give you also what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that no other king shall compare with you all your days. And if you will walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and my commandments, as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your days. What an amazing promise. Absolutely incredible. Verse 15, and Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream. Then he came to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered up burnt offerings and peace offerings, and made a feast for all his servants. So Solomon celebrates and worships because of what the Lord has promised him. He was already worshiping, he was already giving God glory and honor and praise, but now with this response, he does even more. Absolutely amazing, and what a man. What a great man of faith we have in Solomon. And then we have not just the statement that God is giving him a wise and discerning mind, a mind of understanding, but then we are given, and we are so grateful we are given this text, we are given an example of this. So 1 Kings 3:16-28. Then two prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. The one woman said, "Oh, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I gave birth to a child while she was in the house. Then on the third day after I gave birth, this woman also gave birth, and we were alone. There was no one else with us in the house. Only we two were in the house. And this woman's son died in the night because she lay on him. And she arose at midnight and took my son from beside me while your servant slept, and laid him at her breast, and laid her dead son at my breast. When I rose in the morning to nurse my child, behold, he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning, behold, he was not the child that I had borne." But the other woman said, "No, the living child is mine, and the dead child is yours." The first said, "No, the dead child is yours, and the living child is mine." Thus they spoke before the king. So quite a predicament, but Solomon the wise figures out a way to figure out the truth. Then the king said, the one says, "This is my son that is alive, and your son is dead." And the other says, "No, but your son is dead, and my son is the living one." And the king said, "Bring me a sword." So a sword was brought before the king. And the king said, "Divide the living child in two, and give half to the one and half to the other." Then the woman whose son was alive said to the king, because her heart yearned for her son, "Oh, my lord, give her the living child, and by no means put him to death." But the other said, "He shall be neither mine nor yours. Divide him." Then the king answered and said, "Give the living child to the first woman, and by no means put him to death. She is his mother." And all Israel heard of the judgment that the king had rendered, and they stood in awe of the king, because they perceived that the wisdom of God was in him to do justice. Just absolutely, such a heart-wrenching but glorious story. And Solomon had the wisdom to discern who the real mother was, and all was well. And notice, all Israel heard of this judgment. They stood in awe of Solomon. They knew, they perceived that the wisdom of God was in him to do justice. So if his kingdom had not been established yet, which it had, he had gotten rid of some of the adversaries, he was already setting things up to be great for the kingdom, working on the palace, working on the temple, working on the wall, setting alliances with a great enemy at some points in the past in Egypt. This, of course, put everything over the top. The people loved this king. All right, so let's take a look at our applications for this week from the booklet. Solomon is described as one who loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David, except that he sacrificed and burned incense at the high places. This statement is important, for it reminds us that love demands obedience. Making a similar point, the Apostle John wrote, and the booklet quotes one or two verses from 1 John 5. We'll look at verses 1 through 4. Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God, and everyone who loves the Father loves whoever has been born of him. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and obey his commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. For everyone who has been born of God overcomes the world. And this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. The booklet goes on to say, the description of Solomon also shows that those who love the Lord can be guilty of doing things that are not pleasing to God. God did not want his people worshiping at pagan altars. This was true in Solomon's day, and it remains true today. We must obey the Lord in all things. All right, then application 2. Solomon's desire to properly lead God's people led him to ask for wisdom. God was willing to grant this request and provide Solomon with more than he asked. God remains willing to provide wisdom to his people when they ask. James wrote, and we'll look at verses 5 through 8 of James 1, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. All right, let's move on to our discussion questions. And I will encourage you once again to pause after each one and think about these things, or discuss them if you're with someone else. Number 1, why did Solomon ask for wisdom? What can we learn from this? Number 2, how do we learn to place more trust in God and less trust in our own abilities? And number 3, simply, what does this passage teach us about God? All right, well, next time we will move to 2 Chronicles, and we will look at chapter 2, verses 1 to 18. Solomon builds the temple. May the Lord continue to bless us as we study his word.